The Testament of War, Memoirs from the Terran Conflict Part. The iron witness, the archive chamber, was cold, built deep beneath the central library of Zinthara Prime. Thelkai adjusted her recording equipment one final time, her 4 delicate fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Across from her sat Fleet Marshal Karavesh, his chitinous exoskeleton bearing the deep purple hue of advanced age. Scars crisscrossed his armor plating, each one a story, each one a memory of battles fought across 100 worlds, but it was the trio of parallel marks across his chest plate that drew Thelkai's attention. They were different from the others, deeper, more deliberate. She had seen similar marks on other veterans of that war. The war, the one that changed everything. Karavesh noticed her staring. His compound eyes flickered with something that might have been amusement or perhaps pain. It was hard to tell with his species. Time had made reading emotions difficult for him. The scars ran deeper than flesh. "You want to know about the humans," Karavesh said. It was not a question. His voice carried the weight of gravel scraping against stone, worn down by too many years of giving orders, of watching soldiers die, of making impossible choices. Thelkai activated the recording matrix. Quantum-encoded data streams began capturing every word, every gesture, every pause. This testimony would survive for millennia, preserved in the great archives so that future generations might understand what their ancestors had faced. The Unified Council has commissioned these recordings, Thelkai began formally. They want the younger generations to understand the Terran War, to know why our people changed, why we abandoned our conquest doctrine. She paused, her mandibles clicking softly. They want to know why we fear humans. Karavesh's breathing spiracles expanded and contracted slowly. He reached for a container of nutrient solution with a trembling limb. The liquid was the color of copper, tinged with the supplements that kept aging Xinthians functional. He drank deeply before setting it down. "Fear," he repeated, tasting the word like bitter medicine. "Yes, that is the correct word. But it is not the whole truth. We fear them, yes, but we also respect them. We understand them now in ways we did not before. That understanding cost us 3 million soldiers and control of 17 star systems." The Fleet Marshal shifted his bulk in the specialized seating designed for his species' unique physiology. Even in repose, Karavesh carried himself with military bearing, the habits of a lifetime impossible to shed. "I was a battalion commander when it started," Karavesh continued. "Young, ambitious, certain of our empire's superiority. The Xinthian collective had expanded for 3 centuries unchallenged. We had subjugated 42 alien civilizations. Some fought, most surrendered when they understood the futility of resistance. We were not cruel conquerors, but we were absolute. Submit or be destroyed. Simple, clean, efficient." Thelkai made a note on her data tablet. "The historical records indicate that first contact with humanity occurred at the Kepler 442b colony in the year 2287 by human reckoning." "Can you tell me about that?" Karvesh's eyes darkened, the equivalent of a human's distant stare. Kepler 442b. The humans called it New Montana. A colony of approximately 40,000 humans, mostly agricultural workers, mining specialists, and their families. Our intelligence suggested minimal military presence. A small garrison, perhaps 200 soldiers with outdated equipment. The colony had been established for only 15 years. By our assessment, they were isolated, vulnerable, and strategically insignificant. Then why attack it? Thelkai asked. "Resources," Karavesh said bluntly. "The system contained deposits of iridium and rare earth elements, valuable for our industrial complexes. Also, the planet itself was remarkably Earth-like, which meant it could support our labor colonies. But more than that, it was a message. Humanity had been expanding into what we considered our territorial sphere. New Montana was meant to be a demonstration. Show them our power, force their surrender, negotiate from a position of strength. Standard procedure." He paused, his mandibles working silently as he gathered his thoughts. "I was assigned to the 3rd Expeditionary Force under High Commander Thexlar. We arrived with 16 capital ships, 40 support vessels, and enough ground forces to occupy a planet 10 times New Montana's population. It should have been routine." Thelkai leaned forward slightly. "But it was not." "No," Karavesh said quietly. "It was not." The Fleet Marshal accessed his personal data archive, projecting a holographic display between them. The image showed a blue-green world hanging in space, two small moons orbiting close by. Continents sprawled across the surface, covered in green vegetation and brown agricultural grids. We broadcast our standard demands. Surrender within 12 standard hours or face military action. Evacuate all population centers. Disable all military assets. Prepare for occupation forces. We had done this 42 times before. 42 times the local governments had complied. Some had tried to negotiate better terms. A few had postured and made threats. But in the end, they all submitted. Karvesh's voice took on an edge. The human response came 6 hours later. A single transmission from a woman named Governor Elena Vasquez. Her message was short. He paused, and for a moment Thelkai saw something flash across his features. Admiration, perhaps, mixed with old anger. She said, "New Montana is human soil. We will never surrender it to invaders. Come if you must, but know that every meter you take will be paid for in your blood." High Commander Thexelar found this amusing. Karvesh continued. He ordered immediate orbital bombardment of their military installations. Our ships fired plasma lances that could melt through reinforced titanium. We destroyed their defense platforms, their small spaceport, their communications arrays. The colony should have collapsed. Their militia should have scattered. Thelkai checked her recordings. Everything was being captured perfectly. What happened instead? Karvesh's eyes flickered. They shot back. Not with plasma weapons or railguns or any of the advanced weaponry we expected. They used chemical rockets, kinetic missiles, even jury-rigged mining charges launched from improvised catapults. Primitive, crude, inefficient, but they kept shooting. For 3 days while we systematically dismantled their infrastructure, they kept fighting. The holographic display changed, showing combat footage from Xinthian gunship cameras. Thelkai watched as human defenders fired from rubble, from hidden positions, from buildings that should have been evacuated. Every shot was answered with overwhelming firepower, yet the humans remained. We landed ground forces on the 4th day, Karvesh said. I commanded the assault on the capital settlement, a place they called New Helena. Population 12,000. Our intelligence had confirmed that Governor Vasquez had ordered all civilians to the southern continent for evacuation. We expected minimal resistance, perhaps a few hundred militia, holding symbolic positions. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation in his species. The entire city was a fortress. Every building rigged with explosives. Every street corner a killing field. The humans had not evacuated. They had armed everyone. Children as young as 14 cycles fought alongside adults. The elderly operated weapons from fortified positions. They had turned their entire settlement into a weapon designed for one purpose, making us bleed. Thelkai felt her breathing spiracles constrict. Surely your superior firepower overwhelmed them. Eventually, Karvesh admitted. But not quickly. Not easily. We brought in heavy armor, aerial bombardment, chemical suppressants. For every building we took, we lost soldiers. Not many by numerical standards, perhaps 3 or 4 for each structure. But it accumulated. More importantly, it taught us something we had never experienced before. What was that? That humans do not calculate odds the way we do. A Xinthian commander evaluates tactical situations based on efficiency, resource management, acceptable losses. Humans evaluate based on something else entirely. Purpose, meaning, rage. Karvesh's voice dropped. They fight not because they think they can win, but because they believe they must fight. It makes them unpredictable, dangerous in ways that pure military strength cannot account for. The hologram shifted again, showing underground tunnels, vast networks carved beneath the colony. On the 8th day, we discovered the tunnels. Kilometers of passages connecting every major settlement, every farmstead, every resource depot. The humans had been building them for years, disguised as utility infrastructure and geothermal projects. While we controlled the surface, they controlled everything beneath. Karvesh stood slowly, his age making the movement labored. He walked to the chamber's window, looking out over the cityscape of Xinthera Prime. They had stored weapons, food, medical supplies, everything they needed for a prolonged resistance. They would strike from below, kill a patrol or destroy a supply depot, then vanish back into the earth. We tried to flush them out with gas. They had sealed sections and filtration systems. We sent troops into the tunnels. They collapsed them, buried our soldiers alive. Thelkai processed this information. The official reports state that New Montana was secured in 3 weeks. Secured? Karvesh repeated with dark humor. Yes, technically we secured it. We controlled the surface. We had killed or captured most of the organized resistance, but we never truly held that planet. For the 2 years we occupied New Montana before the war ended, our soldiers died every day. Accidents that were not accidents. Equipment failures that were sabotage. Soldiers who vanished on patrol and were never found. He turned back to face her. But the worst part, the thing that truly opened my eyes, happened in the final week of the initial assault. We had cornered the last major resistance group in the Central Administrative Complex. Governor Vasquez was with them. We had overwhelming force surrounding the building. High Commander Thexlar ordered me to broadcast a final surrender demand. Karvesh's voice softened. I spoke to Governor Vasquez directly. I told her that her resistance was admirable but futile. I promised that if she surrendered, her people would be treated fairly, relocated to a suitable world, given compensation for their losses. I was sincere. I wanted to minimize further bloodshed. I had seen enough death. What did she say? Thelkai asked, though she suspected she knew. She said that her people had voted. They had decided that dying free on their own world was better than living as refugees in someone else's charity. Then she said something I will never forget. Karvesh's compound eyes glistened with moisture, a rare display of emotion. She said, "Commander, you can have this planet, but you will never have it while any of us still breathe. And when we are gone, when you think you have won, remember that there are billions more humans in the galaxy. We sent a message to Earth the day you arrived. They are coming, and they will remember what you did here." The recording matrix hummed, capturing every word. Thelkai waited, sensing there was more. "We stormed the building," Karvesh said flatly. "It took 4 hours of brutal close-quarters combat. Governor Vasquez died on the 3rd floor, firing an antique chemical weapon until she ran out of ammunition, then fighting with a blade. She killed 3 of my soldiers before she fell. She was 63 years old by human reckoning." He returned to his seat, suddenly looking every one of his many years. "That was my first lesson about humans. They do not surrender. They do not break. They do not calculate acceptable losses the way rational species do. They fight with their entire being, and when they cannot fight anymore, they make sure their deaths cost you something." Thelkai's fingers trembled slightly as she made notes. "The casualties?" "We lost 2,300 soldiers taking New Montana," Karvesh said. "The humans lost 38,000. By any military standard, we achieved an overwhelming victory. But High Commander Thexlar did not celebrate. None of us did. Because we understood what Governor Vasquez had told me was true. Earth had received her message. Humanity knew what we had done. The Fleet Marshal's breathing spiracles contracted. And humans, as I would learn over the next 7 years, do not forgive. They do not forget, and they never ever stop coming." Thelkai saved her recording data, checking that everything had been properly captured. The records indicate that the Terran fleet arrived in Zynthian space 6 months after New Montana fell. Karvesh's mandibles clicked once, sharply. 6 months. That is how long it took humanity to mobilize for total war. 6 months to turn their entire civilization into a weapon aimed at our empire. His eyes met Thelkai's. "Young historian, you asked me to speak about humans so your generation might understand. Here is what you must understand above all else. We started a war with New Montana. We thought we were conquering a small colony on the frontier. What we actually did was wake something ancient and terrible in the human species. We gave them a reason to unleash 7,000 years of accumulated knowledge about warfare, about violence, about the art of killing." He stood slowly, indicating the interview was reaching its natural conclusion for the day. "I will tell you about what came next in our following sessions. I will tell you about the battles, the strategies, the horrors. But remember this: every species in the galaxy has the capacity for violence. But humans have made it a science. They have studied it, refined it, perfected it across millennia of killing each other. When they turn that expertise outward, toward an external threat," Karvesh's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, "it is like watching a star go supernova. Beautiful, terrible, and absolutely unstoppable." The recording matrix powered down. Thelkai sat in the sudden silence, processing everything she had heard. Outside the archive chamber, the city of Zinthera Prime continued its daily rhythm, its people going about their lives in peace. A peace bought with the blood of 3 million soldiers and the surrender of the mightiest empire the galaxy had ever known. A peace maintained by the knowledge that somewhere out there, humans watched and remembered. The Storm Doctrine, Thelkai returned to the archive chamber 3 days later. She had spent the intervening time reviewing historical records, cross-referencing Karvesh's testimony with official military reports. The discrepancies were startling. Where official documents spoke of strategic withdrawals and tactical repositioning, the truth appeared far more brutal. Where casualty numbers were listed as acceptable losses, the reality was catastrophic defeat. Karvesh was already waiting when she arrived, his massive form settled into the reinforced seating. He had brought his own nutrient solutions this time. Several containers lined up beside him like soldiers awaiting orders. The parallel scars on his chest plate seemed darker today, or perhaps it was just the lighting. "You have been reading the archives," Karvesh observed as Thelkai set up her equipment. It was not a question. "You have questions about the numbers." "The casualty reports do not match the official records," Thelkai said carefully. "The discrepancies are significant." Karvesh's mandibles clicked in what might have been bitter amusement. The High Council was embarrassed. They minimized our losses in the public records, claiming that many ships were merely damaged rather than destroyed, that many soldiers were missing rather than dead. Political necessity, they called it. Maintaining morale. He gestured dismissively. "But you want to know the truth. The real numbers. The actual cost of underestimating humans." Thelkai activated the recording matrix. "I want to know what happened after New Montana. The records indicate that Earth responded with immediate military action." "Immediate is relative," Karvesh said. "As I mentioned, it took 6 months for the human fleet to arrive in Xinthian space. But those 6 months were not idle. They were preparing, mobilizing, transforming their entire civilization into a war machine. You must understand, humans had been at peace for nearly a generation before we attacked New Montana. Their military was designed for defense, for protecting their colonies from pirates and hostile environments. They had to reinvent themselves." He accessed his personal data archive again, projecting holographic images between them. Ship designs, tactical formations, weapon specifications. This is what human vessels looked like before the war. Multi-purpose craft built for exploration and light defense. Adequate technology, nothing exceptional. Their largest warships were roughly equivalent to our medium cruisers. The display shifted, showing different designs. Sleeker, more aggressive, bristling with weapon systems. This is what they built in 6 months. They stripped every non-essential system, maximized weapons payload and engine power. They converted cargo vessels into missile platforms. They turned mining ships into assault carriers. Every human colony contributed. They called it total mobilization. Thelkai studied the images. "How many ships did they field?" "Initially, 347 combat-capable vessels," Karvesh replied. "We had over 2,000 ships in our empire's military. By numerical standards, they were hopelessly outmatched. High Commander Texlar was confident. He saw their fleet mobilization as a desperate gesture, a face-saving measure before inevitable negotiations. He was preparing to destroy their fleet quickly, then dictate terms to Earth directly." The fleet marshal's eyes darkened. He was a fool. We were all fools. The holographic display changed to show a star system. Multiple planets orbited a yellow star, one of them ringed with stations and defensive platforms. Proxima Centauri, humanity's first interstellar colony system, established nearly a century before our first contact. 4 billion humans lived in that system across 3 colonized worlds and 70 orbital habitats. It was also the location of their largest military shipyard. Karvesh's voice took on a harder edge. High Commander Thexlar led the Second Armada personally. 800 ships, the largest fleet we had ever assembled. Our plan was simple: jump into the Proxima system, destroy the shipyards, eliminate the human fleet, and force Earth's surrender through overwhelming display of power. Standard shock and awe doctrine. It had worked 42 times before. "It did not work against humans," Thelkai said quietly. "No," Karvesh agreed. The human commander was Admiral Sarah Chen, 54 years old, former explorer captain who had been recalled to active military service. The intelligence we had on her suggested a cautious, methodical officer, good at logistics, experienced with deep space operations, but no combat record to speak of. We expected her to either flee the system or entrench around Earth and force a siege. He manipulated the hologram, showing fleet positions. Instead, she did something we never anticipated. She met us at the edge of the system with her entire fleet, 347 human ships against our 800. She formed them into a defensive sphere around Proxima Station. the system's largest military facility. It appeared to be a desperate last stand, a futile attempt to protect their shipyards. Karvesh paused to drink from his nutrient solution. High Commander Thexlar was pleased. He thought Admiral Chen had made a tactical error, concentrating her forces in a fixed position where our superior numbers could overwhelm her. He ordered a full assault, every ship committed to destroying the human fleet and capturing the station. The hologram began animating, showing ships moving into attack positions. What we did not know, what our intelligence had failed to discover, was that Admiral Chen had spent 6 months fortifying that space. Every approach vector was mapped and pre-targeted. Every piece of space debris had been catalogued. Every asteroid had been hollowed out and filled with weapons. Proxima Station itself had been converted into a fortress. Thelkai watched the animation with growing dread, though she already knew how this battle ended. The humans had prepared a trap. Not just a trap, Karvesh corrected. A killing field. The moment our fleet entered weapons range, everything opened fire at once. The station, which we thought was a shipyard, revealed itself as a weapons platform with more firepower than any vessel in our fleet. The asteroids, which we thought were navigational hazards, were automated gun platforms. The debris field, which we thought was just wreckage, was filled with mines and missile pods. His voice grew distant, remembering. I was commanding a cruiser group in the 3rd attack wave. I watched the first wave of our ships enter the engagement zone. Within 90 seconds, 40% of them were destroyed. Not damaged, not disabled, destroyed, vaporized by concentrated fire. The second wave fared only slightly better. They tried to spread out, avoid the kill zones, but the humans had anticipated that too. They had weapons positioned for every possible approach. High Commander Thexlar should have withdrawn, Thelkai said. He tried, Karvesh replied. But Admiral Chen had prepared for that as well. The moment we began retreating, human ships broke from their defensive formation and pursued. Not all of them, just enough to keep us engaged to prevent an orderly withdrawal. They were smaller, faster, more maneuverable. They harried us like predatory pack animals separating prey from the herd. The hologram showed the chaos of the battle. That was when we learned about human doctrine. They call it combined arms warfare. Their ships did not fight independently. They worked together in coordinated groups. Smaller attack craft would disable shields and point defenses. Then larger ships would deliver killing blows. They used missiles to force us into defensive postures, then hit us with energy weapons while our shields were cycling. They adapted constantly, changing tactics whenever we found countermeasures. Karvesh stood and walked to the window again, as if the memories were too heavy to bear sitting. The Battle of Proxima Station lasted 14 hours. We lost 437 ships. The humans lost 92. High Commander Thexlar's flagship was destroyed 6 hours into the battle. He died with 2,000 crew members when a human ship rammed them at full combat speed. A suicide attack? Thelkai asked. No, Karvesh said. The human captain had already ordered his crew to evacuate in escape pods. He stayed behind alone, set his ship on an intercept course, and locked himself in the bridge. His name was Captain James Okoro. He was 71 years old, a veteran of the colonial services. He gave up his life to eliminate our fleet command and throw our forces into disarray. The fleet marshal turned back to face her. That was the second lesson humans taught us. They do not waste lives carelessly, but they are willing to sacrifice themselves when it serves a greater purpose. Every human death becomes a weapon in itself, buying time, creating opportunities, sending messages. They fight with the understanding that sometimes one life exchanged for hundreds is a victory. Thelkai made notes, her fingers moving rapidly across her tablet. The human losses were still significant. 92 ships, probably 15 to 20,000 crew members. Admiral Chen held a memorial service 2 days after the battle. Karvesh said, We intercepted the transmission. She spoke about every ship that was lost, named every captain, talked about their lives and families. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She said, we mourn those who fell, but we take pride in what their sacrifice achieved. Proxima holds. The shipyards continue operating, and we have proven that humanity will never be anyone's victim again. He sat back down heavily. That is when I understood. This was not a war for territory or resources. This was an existential conflict. Humans were fighting for their right to exist as a free species, and beings fighting for survival are the most dangerous opponents of all. The holographic display shifted again, showing supply lines and logistics networks. After Proxima, the war changed. We could no longer field massive fleets. Our industrial capacity could not replace losses fast enough. Meanwhile, humans were building ships faster than we could destroy them. Their entire civilization had been mobilized. Every factory, every resource, every technical innovation was directed toward winning the war. They also began employing psychological warfare, Karvesh continued. Admiral Chen had recordings of our defeat at Proxima broadcast to every Xinthian world within communication range. She included footage of our ships being destroyed, our crews abandoning vessels, our formations breaking apart in chaos. She wanted our people to see that we were not invincible. Thelkai's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Did it work? Devastatingly so, Karvesh admitted. For 3 centuries, our empire had projected an image of absolute power. Seeing our fleet shattered by inferior numbers shook public confidence. Recruitment declined. Political leaders began questioning the war's necessity. Some colonies even debated secession rather than continue fighting. He accessed another data file, but the psychological warfare went deeper. Humans began making broadcasts directly to our soldiers. They would list the names of Xinthian casualties, provide details about their families, show images of their homeworlds. They wanted our troops to understand that they were fighting sentient beings who knew them, who had studied them, who saw them as individuals rather than an anonymous enemy. That seems counterproductive, Thelkai said. Surely reminding your enemy's soldiers of their humanity, so to speak, would make them fight harder? Karvesh's eyes flickered. You would think so, but it had the opposite effect. When humans personalized the war, they forced our soldiers to confront the reality of what they were doing. Conquering abstract alien civilizations is one thing. Killing sentient beings whose names and families you know is different. It creates moral friction, makes soldiers question whether they are heroes or murderers. The hologram changed to show a convoy of civilian ships. 6 months after Proxima, I was assigned to intercept a human evacuation convoy, fleeing from the colony world of Tau Ceti. Intelligence indicated 12 transport vessels carrying approximately 50,000 civilians, mostly families of military personnel. They were protected by only 6 escort frigates. It should have been a simple capture operation. Take the convoy intact, use the civilians as leverage in negotiations. His voice grew quieter. It was a trap. The transports were not carrying civilians. They were carrying soldiers, equipment, weapons. The moment we closed to boarding range, they revealed themselves. Those 12 transports each held a battalion of human marines equipped for ship-to-ship combat. The escort frigates were actually advanced missile boats with stealth systems. Karvesh's breathing spiracles expanded and contracted rapidly. We boarded 3 of the transports before we realized the deception. The humans were waiting. They had trained specifically for close-quarters combat in ship corridors, environments where our size and strength advantages meant little. They used breaching charges, poison gas, even hand-to-hand weapons. My boarding parties were slaughtered. The 6 frigates disabled half our fleet before we could respond effectively. And the whole time the humans were broadcasting, they wanted us to know this was deliberate. They wanted us to understand that they would use any tactic, any deception, any strategy that gave them an advantage. Nothing was forbidden. Nothing was beneath them if it meant winning. Thelkai processed this information. The Tau Ceti deception, as it is called in historical records. Military analysts cite it as a turning point in the war. It was, Karvesh confirmed. After that engagement, we could never trust human surrender signals or evacuation convoys. Every tactical situation became a potential trap. The psychological cost was enormous. Our commanders became paralyzed by indecision, afraid to commit forces, terrified of falling into another human stratagem. He manipulated the hologram one final time, showing a dense cluster of ships. The final demonstration of human warfare doctrine came at the Battle of Wolf 359. By this point in the war, we had lost strategic initiative. We were defending our own territory rather than attacking human worlds. The 12th Defense Fleet was protecting our primary logistics hub, a station that supplied 40% of our military's food and medical supplies. Admiral Chen sent a message before the battle began. She said, "Your fleet will be destroyed today. Your station will be captured. Your supply lines will be severed. You cannot win, but I'm giving you 1 hour to evacuate all non-combatants. 1 hour, then we attack." She kept her word. Exactly 1 hour later, the human fleet engaged. Karvesh's eyes reflected the holographic light. We fought for 3 days. The humans never stopped coming. When one ship was destroyed, 2 more took its place. When we disabled a vessel, they would evacuate the crew and then use the derelict as a missile, ramming it into our formations. They even deployed autonomous drone swarms, hundreds of small craft controlled by artificial intelligence that adapted to our tactics in real time. The station fell on the 4th day. The humans took it intact, as Admiral Chen had promised. They captured enough supplies to sustain their fleet for a year. More importantly, they captured classified information about our empire's economic infrastructure, our industrial bottlenecks, our civilian population centers. They used that information to plan the final phase of the war. Thelkai saved her recordings. The Ghost Fleet campaign. Yes, Karvesh said. But that is a story for another session. For now, understand this. The Storm Doctrine, as humans called their military strategy, was not about destroying enemy forces efficiently. It was about breaking enemy will. Every battle, every tactic, every broadcast was designed to make us question whether we could win, whether we should continue fighting, whether our empire was worth the cost. He stood slowly, signaling the end of the session. Humans did not just fight a military war. They fought a psychological one, an economic one, a cultural one. They attacked us on every level simultaneously, and we had no doctrine, no training, no experience for defending against that kind of total warfare. Our empire had conquered through strength and intimidation. Humans conquered through exhaustion and inevitability. By the time we realized the difference, it was too late. Thelkai watched the old warrior move toward the chamber door. Fleet Marshal, one question before you go. After everything you have described, after all the losses and defeats, why did the High Council wait so long to sue for peace? Karvesh paused in the doorway. Pride, fear, disbelief, take your choice. We kept thinking that the next battle would turn the tide, that the next fleet would succeed where others had failed. We could not accept that a species we considered technologically inferior had outfought us, outsmarted us, and outmaneuvered us at every turn. He looked back at her. It took losing 2/3 of our military and watching human fleets entering our core systems before the High Council finally acknowledged reality. We had started a war we could not win against an enemy that would never stop fighting. And even then, Karvesh added softly, I think what truly broke us was not fear of defeat, but fear of what humans would become if we pushed them any further. We had seen what they did when defending their colonies. We did not want to learn what they would do when conquering ours. The door closed behind him, leaving Thelkai alone with her recordings and her thoughts. Outside, Synthera Prime continued its peaceful existence, unaware of the horrors their ancestors had faced and the lessons purchased with millions of lives. The peace that scars. The archive chamber felt different during the final session. Thelkai had requested that the lighting be adjusted, making the space brighter, less oppressive. She wanted this recording to feel hopeful, or at least less heavy with despair. Karvesh had agreed, though his expression suggested he found the gesture amusing in a melancholy way. The fleet marshal looked older than he had during their previous sessions, as if recounting these memories had physically aged him. The nutrient solutions beside him remained mostly untouched, and his movements were more labored. But his eyes were clear, focused, ready to complete his testimony. You want to know about the end, Karvesh said, before Thelkai could activate her recording matrix. About how the war concluded, about the peace negotiations, about what happened when our proud empire finally bent its neck and asked for mercy. Thelkai activated the recording systems, the familiar hum filling the chamber. The historical records state that the High Council voted to open negotiations after the Battle of Zinthera Secundus, when human forces destroyed the Fourth Fleet and established orbital presence over one of our core worlds. That is the official version, Karvesh agreed. The truth is messier. The High Council had been debating surrender for months before that battle. Every session ended in deadlock, with traditionalists insisting we could still win, and pragmatists arguing that continued fighting would result in total annihilation. Zinthera Secundus simply provided political cover for what we already knew we had to do. He accessed his data archive, projecting a holographic map of Zinthian space. Large portions were marked in red. By that point in the war, we had lost 68% of our fleet, 43% of our industrial capacity, and strategic control of 17 systems. Human forces had established what they called containment zones around our remaining territories. They were not pressing attacks anymore. They were waiting, blockading our worlds, allowing economic pressure to do their work for them. They were starving you out, Thelkai observed. Efficiently, Karvesh confirmed. Human strategists had studied our logistics networks and identified critical choke points. They did not need to invade our worlds. They simply cut off trade routes, interdicted supply convoys, and waited for shortages to create civil unrest. It was remarkably effective and far less costly than continued military action. The hologram zoomed to show a neutral space station. The High Council sent me to the peace negotiations. I was chosen for several reasons. My military record was distinguished but not tied to any of the war's worst atrocities. I had advocated for diplomatic solutions before they were politically acceptable. Most importantly, I had never publicly expressed hatred for humans, which made me palatable as a negotiator. The meeting took place at Delos Station, a neutral facility operated by the Keshtarian Trading Cooperative. The Keshtarians had maintained strict neutrality throughout the war, refusing to supply either side. They provided the perfect neutral ground. Karvesh's mandibles clicked softly. I arrived with a delegation of 20 officials, military advisors, and legal experts. We came in an unarmed diplomatic vessel, transmitted continuously our peaceful intentions, and followed every protocol to demonstrate our sincerity. He paused, manipulating the hologram to show the station's interior. The human delegation consisted of 7 people. Just 7? At first I thought this was an insult, a demonstration of how little they valued negotiations with us. Then I met them and I understood. They had not sent functionaries or minor officials. They had sent the people who actually controlled Earth's war effort. Thelkai leaned forward, her interest piqued. Admiral Chen was among them. Admiral Sarah Chen, Supreme Commander of United Earth Forces, Karvesh confirmed. Also present were General Marcus Volkov, Director of Strategic Operations, Ambassador Patricia Okafor, Chief Diplomat of the Solar Council, and several senior military and civilian advisors. The woman who led the delegation, however, was someone I had not expected. General Sarah Morrison, the officer who had commanded ground forces during the liberation of New Montana. The fleet marshal's eyes grew distant. I had studied General Morrison's file before the meeting. Age 67, career military officer, expert in asymmetric warfare and resistance operations. She had been born on New Montana, had lived there until age 30 when she joined Earth's military. When we attacked her homeworld, she had requested immediate transfer to combat operations. She fought in every major ground engagement of the war, earning a reputation for tactical brilliance and absolute ruthlessness toward enemy forces. The woman who greeted me in that conference room bore the physical evidence of her service. She walked with a slight limp from an injury sustained during the Battle of Kepler 186. Her left hand was cybernetic, the original having been lost in combat. Scars marked her face and neck, but it was her eyes that struck me most. They were hard, cold, evaluating. She looked at me the way a predator looks at prey it has decided not to kill yet. Thelkai made notes. What were your first impressions? Terror, Karvesh said bluntly. I had commanded fleets, fought in dozens of battles, made life and death decisions affecting thousands of soldiers. But standing before those 7 humans, I felt genuine fear. They represented a species that had taken everything we threw at them, and not only survived but prevailed. They had learned our tactics, adapted to our strategies, and defeated us so thoroughly that we came begging for peace. The hologram displayed the conference room. General Morrison opened the negotiations with a statement I will never forget. She said, "Fleet Marshal Karvesh, you and your government initiated an unprovoked attack on a human colony, killed 40,000 civilians and soldiers, and sparked a war that has cost millions of lives on both sides. You are here today because your empire can no longer sustain this conflict, not because you have discovered moral objections to conquest. Am I correct in this assessment?" Karvesh's breathing spiracles contracted. I could have lied, offered diplomatic platitudes about mutual misunderstandings and cultural differences, but General Morrison's eyes told me that lies would end negotiations immediately. So I told her the truth. Yes, we attacked because we believed we could, because we wanted your resources, because we never imagined you would fight so effectively. I told her that every assumption we made had been wrong, every calculation had been flawed, and we were now facing the consequences of our arrogance. How did she respond? Thelakai asked. She nodded, as if I had confirmed something she already knew. Then she said, "At least you are honest. That is more than I expected." She activated a holographic display showing casualty figures, battle sites, and destroyed infrastructure. She made us look at every number, every location, every consequence of the war we had started. It took hours. My delegation sat in silence, confronted with the full scope of what our empire had done. The fleet marshal stood and walked to the window. When the presentation finished, General Morrison asked me a question. She said, "Fleet Marshal, do you understand why we fought so hard? Why we refused every offer of compromise, every suggestion that we should accept partial occupation or resource-sharing agreements?" What did you tell her? I said that I thought I understood. That humans value independence, that they do not submit to external authority, that pride prevented them from accepting terms that other species would consider reasonable. Karvesh turned back to face Thelakai. General Morrison shook her head. She said, "You still do not understand. Let me explain something about human history." He returned to his seat. What General Morrison told me next changed everything I thought I knew about humanity. She explained that humans have been fighting wars among themselves for their entire history. 10,000 years of continuous warfare, of empires rising and falling, of civilizations destroying each other. She said that humans have killed more humans than any external threat ever could, that they have perfected violence against their own species to an art form. But, Karvesh continued, she also explained that through all that bloodshed, humans learned something crucial. They learned that some things are worth fighting for, that freedom matters more than survival, that principles are more valuable than peace. She said that human history is filled with peoples who chose to fight impossible odds rather than submit, who died rather than surrender their values, who passed down stories of resistance to inspire future generations. Thelkai's mandibles moved thoughtfully. She was explaining their cultural context. More than that, Karvesh said, she was explaining why we could never have won. When we attacked New Montana, we did not just attack one colony. We attacked an idea that humans have died for throughout their history. The idea that people have the right to live free from tyranny, that no government has the authority to conquer others, that resistance against oppression is not just justified, but mandatory. The hologram changed to show images of human historical events. General Morrison showed us examples from their past. Wars fought for independence, rebellions against occupiers, resistance movements that operated for decades against superior forces. She showed us how humans have studied every conflict, learned from every victory and defeat, built an institutional memory of warfare that spans millennia. She said that when we invaded New Montana, we activated something deep in human consciousness. We became the latest in a long line of would-be conquerors, and humans responded the way they always have to such threats. With total commitment, absolute refusal to submit, and willingness to sacrifice everything rather than accept subjugation, Karvesh's voice grew softer. Then she asked me another question. She said, "Do you know why I am leading these negotiations, Fleet Marshal? Why a ground commander is speaking for humanity rather than our president or a career diplomat?" I had no answer. She told me it was because she wanted me to see the face of someone whose home I had helped destroy. She wanted me to understand that I was not negotiating with abstractions or political entities. I was negotiating with a person who had every reason to hate me, to want revenge, to demand the harshest possible terms. And yet she said she was there to offer something unexpected. Not vengeance, but reconciliation. Not continued war, but peace. Thelakai checked her recordings, ensuring everything was being captured. What terms did they offer? Fair ones, Karvesh admitted. Surprisingly fair given their position of strength. Immediate cessation of hostilities. Withdrawal of all Xinthian military forces from contested territories. Reparations to be paid over 50 years rather than immediately, to avoid economic collapse. No occupation of Xinthian worlds. No war crimes trials for military personnel who followed orders, though certain high commanders were to be surrendered for international justice proceedings. The terms also included technology sharing, cultural, exchange programs, and joint economic development initiatives. The humans did not want to destroy our empire. They wanted to transform it, to integrate us into a galactic community based on cooperation rather than conquest. The fleet marshal's eyes flickered. I asked General Morrison why they were being so generous. Why not impose harsh terms? Occupy our worlds. Punish us for attacking them. She said something I will never forget. She said, "Because we have learned from our own history. Harsh peace terms create resentment, plant seeds for future conflicts. We do not want to repeat the mistakes humans made in their past. We want to end this war in a way that prevents the next one." Karvesh manipulated the hologram, showing a memorial structure. As part of the peace agreement, humans proposed building a joint memorial on New Montana, a monument to remember all those who died in the war, both human and Xinthian. They wanted future generations of both species to visit, to learn, to understand the cost of unnecessary conflict. I attended the dedication ceremony 2 years after the peace treaty was signed. General Morrison gave a speech. She talked about the soldiers who died defending New Montana, but she also talked about Xinthian soldiers who died far from home, following orders they probably questioned. She said that war makes victims of everyone, that even the conquerors lose something essential when they choose violence over diplomacy. Thelkai's fingers moved across her tablet. How did your people react to the peace terms? Mixed reactions, Karvesh said. Some celebrated the end of bloodshed. Others felt humiliated by our defeat, argued we should have fought to the last warrior rather than accept peace. There were protests, political upheavals, even a few attempted coups by military hardliners who could not accept that we had lost. But over time, something interesting happened. Young Xinthians began interacting with humans through the cultural exchange programs. They learned human languages, studied human history, even visited Earth. What they found contradicted everything our propaganda had taught us. Humans were not monsters. They were people, with families and dreams and hopes, who had simply refused to accept conquest. The fleet marshal stood slowly, preparing for the final part of his testimony. The war ended officially 7 years and 4 months after we attacked New Montana. In that time, 3 million Xinthian warriors died. Approximately 6 million humans, both military and civilian, lost their lives. Entire economies were disrupted. Technologies that should have advanced civilization were diverted to destruction. And for what? Resources we could have obtained through trade, territory we did not need, pride that left us broken. He walked to the window, looking out over Xinthara Prime. But something else happened. Our defeat forced us to question everything about our empire, our culture, our place in the galaxy. We had to confront the reality that conquest is not strength, that subjugating others does not prove superiority, that true civilization is measured not by how many worlds you control, but by how you treat other sentient beings. Thelkai joined him at the window. And now, what is your assessment of human-Xinthian relations today? Karvesh's mandibles moved in what might have been a smile. We are partners now, strange as that seems. Human technology has advanced our medical sciences. Our agricultural techniques have helped them terraform hostile worlds. We trade, we collaborate, we even have joint military exercises against piracy and other galactic threats. The species we went to war with has become our most valuable ally. But, he added, his voice growing serious, we never forget what they are capable of. There is a reason the Xinthian High Council consults with Earth before making any significant military decisions. There is a reason our young warriors study human warfare doctrine as part of their training. We learned our lesson. We learned it in blood and fire and defeat. He turned to face the recording matrix. That is why I am giving this testimony, not to justify what we did, but to ensure future generations understand what happened, why it happened, and what we learned from it. The war with humanity was the greatest disaster in Xinthian history, but it was also the greatest teacher. We learned that technology does not guarantee victory, that numbers do not ensure success, that the will to fight matters more than the ability to fight. We learned that some species cannot be conquered because they would rather die than submit. And we learned that making enemies of such a species is the height of foolishness. Karvesh's voice grew stronger, but we also learned something more important. We learned that enemies can become friends, that defeat can lead to growth, that admitting you were wrong is not weakness but wisdom. The humans could have destroyed us. They chose instead to redeem us. That choice, more than any battle or tactic, showed us what true strength looks like. He gestured to the window, to the city beyond. You see those towers? That park where young Xinthians play? That memorial to our war dead? All of this exists because humans chose peace over vengeance. They won the war militarily, but they won something more important by winning the peace. They won our respect, our friendship, and our eternal gratitude that they were not the monsters we had been. Thelkai saved the final recording, her task complete. Thank you, Fleet Marshal. Your testimony will be preserved for all future generations. They will learn from your experiences, from your mistakes, and hopefully from your wisdom. Karvesh nodded slowly. Just make sure they understand the most important lesson. The universe is vast, filled with countless species and civilizations. Some will be stronger than us, some weaker. Some will have technology we cannot imagine. Others will seem primitive. But strength and technology are not what make a species dangerous. What makes them dangerous, he continued, is their willingness to sacrifice everything for what they believe in, their refusal to accept defeat, their ability to turn every setback into a lesson, every loss into motivation. That is what makes humans so terrifying and so admirable. He moved toward the door, his testimony complete. We tried to conquer them and instead learned what it means to be conquered. We tried to break them and instead learned what it means to be broken. And in our defeat, we found something we had lost centuries ago during our conquest campaigns. We found our humanity, so to speak. We remembered what it means to be a civilization worth preserving, rather than an empire worth fearing. Karvesh paused at the threshold. If there is one message I want future generations to understand, it is this. Humanity survived 10,000 years of trying to destroy itself. They will survive anything the universe throws at them. The only question is whether you will face them as enemies or as friends. We chose poorly the first time. We will never make that mistake again. The door closed behind him, leaving Thelkai alone with her recordings and her thoughts. She looked out at the peaceful city, at the monuments and parks, at the Xinthian children playing in the sunlight. Somewhere out there on distant Earth, human children played in similar parks, learned similar lessons, grew up in a galaxy that was more peaceful because two species had learned from their mistakes. The war was over, but its lessons would echo through the centuries. And perhaps Thelkai thought that was exactly as it should be. Peace is more precious when you understand the true cost of war. Friendship is more valuable when you remember what it means to be enemies. She powered down her equipment and prepared to leave. The archive would preserve Fleet Marshal Karvesh's testimony, ensuring that no Xinthian would ever forget what happened when they challenged humanity. And no one would ever forget the grace with which humanity had responded when given the choice between vengeance and reconciliation. Outside the archive, Synthara Prime continued its daily rhythms, a living monument to the peace that scars and the wars that teach. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, human ships patrolled the trade routes, protecting the galaxy they had helped save from the empire that once threatened it. The testament of war was complete. The lessons had been recorded. The future awaited,